here we are, and we are going to be attempting, emphasis on attempting, I'm not sure how we're going to do some of this yet, but we're going to be attempting to replicate the James Webb Space Telescope here. It's a little bit washed out because of the HDR display. I apologize for that. But we can see what's going on here. I've got us some good reference images here. This is a nice 3/4 view. This is an underneath view, and we've got a diagram of the spacecraft bus here with the solar panel being back here. These are radiator panels, apparently, and that should all be good. I've also got us a good reference image of the Ariane 5 that was used to launch it. So that should be absolutely fine. At first, I thought that this wasn't the exact Ariane 5 that launched it, because I got this... The image on the James Webb Wikipedia page wasn't quite as good as this image, and then I was like, well, this probably isn't the same Ariane 5, and then I was like, look at that, Webb Space Telescope, right there. So this is the exact Ariane 5 that launched it. So that is absolutely fine. Let's hop back over to Kerbal here for a moment, and let's talk about, actually, let me hop back to this image here. Let's talk about real quick how we're going to be doing this here and these hex panels. Now, that's going to be interesting. We're going to have to definitely have it be a little bit thicker, and I have no idea how we're going to do the sun shield. This is obviously, if we go down here, this is obviously a hydraulic cylinder that we can do. And we see like an RCS thruster block here. Our communications will go over here. It's not going to be the exact same. I can tell you that right now. We're going to have to take some creative liberties here. So that's going to be exciting. So for now, let's just start with having this be, I don't know, something along the lines of... a Mark II lander can would be dumb. Let's just start with a remote guidance unit, and we're going to say this is like on the top of the spacecraft bus. We might change that a bit later on, but that's just to give us a starting point. Now, I was thinking about what to make the mirrors out of while we were doing the countdown here, and I was thinking, what if we were to make them out of like this? It's got that like gold finish. It's a foil finish, not exactly that mirror polish. But then I was like, well, that's not exactly ideal. But there's these, the probodobadine hex that we can make into a gold finish, and that's much better. It doesn't have that mirror polish, but this is probably as close of an approximation as we're going to get. This is a lot thicker, but that's probably what we've got to work with. So we can do that, and for the center point, I was thinking that we would be able to just use one of... Oh, that's way too big. That is way too big. I was hoping that we'd be able to use that as the center point. That would be ideal. It's definitely too large. I'm going to have to rethink that one. We could simply have this be... The only options are basic and silver. We could have it be like a probodobadine hex 2, although that's much larger. We do have the gold option for some of these others, so we'll come back to that, I think. For the time being, I want to start working on, like, this initial... Let me get switched over here. This initial, like, row here is, I think, what we're going to want to start working on first. And, of course, this has a gentle curve to it. We're going to have to make it so that each one of these can be moved into place, because they are all individually movable. But the Sentinel would be great for the center one. Unfortunately, it's just a little large. I'm not sure what we can really do about that, but we'll see. Okay, so that's kind of the generic idea here. So we're going to need a little bit of space here. So for now, all I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a modular girder segment. And that space is the space that the sun shield will take up. So then after that, this is going to start being the... and we could do something like this. That's going to start being the main mirror. This doesn't like to radially attach on here, which is a little bit sad, but that's fine for the moment. Okay, we could put octagonal struts on here. Those have attachment points like that. And we'd want to do something kind of like this-ish. I mean, that's not exactly where we'd want that. But just as, like, working... Yeah, that could theoretically work. Okay, how tall is the web? It is... Okay, so it is 2 hexagons in size outside of the center hexagon. So, with that in mind, we would essentially size-wise be looking at... And of course, this is way off center. I'm just creating some test articles here right now. So it would size-wise end up being about like that, with this being the center. And then we would have one here. And all of these will need to be individually adjustable, but I'm just checking for size. It looks like we could probably do with having one more modular girder segment here in terms of spacing. And then move these, not duplicate them, just move them up to be, well, it doesn't have to be there. Place it about here. Again, this is all just testing for size and figuring out how all this is going to go. So this is going to go about here, and we'll just make this one be basic for now because that one is different. We'll come up with a different part for that later on. But just checking the size here. That's about the size. Okay. And we're going to need one here, one here, one here, and one here to complete this initial ring. So we're going to need to have additional modular girder segments or something similar to them coming out over this direction, and we're probably not going to have this truss remain the same, but we're just experimenting for the moment and seeing what works. So let's grab something. Where is it? Am I just blind? Modular girder segment. I know you're here somewhere. I think I'm just blind. These are the XLs. Oh, right. I changed the... I wasn't recognizing it. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to put this here-ish for the moment, although I think I want it mounted this way. And then we would want to move that out a little bit. And down, or have 2 of them? Probably have 2 of them. This is just a temporary backplate, and I'm expecting to change this later. Okay, so just for size comparisons, this guy would go... Well, we'll place it there for now. We'll need to move that in a little tighter, but that will need to be self-movable, ultimately. Bring that down about like so. There we go. And then there's this, like, radiator on the side of these, which is a little bit awkward, but it's okay. It'll do. I didn't want to grab that. I want to grab this. Okay. So this would end up being about here-ish. That's not perfect, but that would be a start. Okay. Of course, we'd want this to be in mirror symmetry. And we would then place this about there. It would need to be moved out, for sure. And a little bit down. Okay, we are having some awkwardness ensuing here. That's probably because of the positioning of this guy, though. So we can move that in slightly and then down to be about here. And then just reposition this one as well. This is a substantial gap here that there isn't on the other side. I'm guessing that's having to do with the positioning of this guy. But for now, we'll call that fine. This is just a sketch at this point of what this is going to end up looking like, right? We're going to replace these octagonal struts with things that can be moved in like 3 dimensions, because all of these panels can be moved individually on the real JWST. So that's going to be interesting. We've got some space down here where we'll have to try to figure out how we want to do the sun shield, maybe with structural panels, like insulated structural panels. Maybe. And if we do that, those would need to come out like over this way, right? So we would have to do something like this, and this would have to be collapsible and expandable. And then it would come out like that, and it would do the same this direction in kind of a diamond shape. So that would be very interesting. We've got these 2x2 panels that we might be able to utilize as well. Or we might use some of these structural panels. I'm not sure. There's not really a fabric-y sort of thing in KSP. Can we change this? This is just white. That's dark, gold, silver. Okay. Good to know. So we can use those on the sides, but we're going to have these like stacked and extended. It's going to be very interesting. Not entirely sure how we'll pull that one off yet either. But as like a bit of a sketch here, we will just do that. And is that approximately the right size? I feel like it is needing to be a little bit longer than it is wide. So we would want this to come out ever so slightly like so, maybe even one more. Something like that. Yeah, that feels a bit more like it, but maybe it's not as far in the back. No, it looks like it's about, looking at the reference images here, it looks like it's roughly kite-shaped. Okay, so something like this should do the trick. Cool. This is all just very basic sketches, of course, and we'll work a bit more on getting this all put together a little bit in the future. We'll just get these put in. I want to get all of our mirror panels put in. Probably if we were to put this like there and then just move it would be the best way. Okay. So this is essentially the section that doesn't fold up. With the JWST, each of these move independently, and we will get to that. But the three that are out here, which I will replicate by doing this for now, although that's definitely the wrong way. Replicate by doing this for now and moving that on out this direction. We will get rid of this guy. And these all fold back to the side. Like, they fold this direction. So that's something that we're going to have to support. And I did not mean to grab that. Let's undo that and get that moved. There we go. I wanted to grab this guy and get it placed over here. Again, this back plate here is going to be changed. I'm just looking at scale and how to get this set up approximately correctly right now. So this would then come in over here like that. And that would be the primary mirror once we get it all aligned and set up the way it's supposed to. I'm not convinced by this Probodobodyne hex here. We're probably going to change that to be something else. The question is what? We need something that protrudes out a little bit on top and hopefully has a hole in it and is dark in color. That would be what we would be looking for. So a spotlight, perhaps. It's a little bit small, but that could imply like a camera type thing. What kind of rotation would we need for this guy? It would need to be rotated a little bit weirdly. I don't think that's really our best bet, but there are some interesting options there. Let's look through some of these others. I would prefer to have this guy there, but it's just too big. And then there's the narrowband scanner, which obviously isn't going to work either. What part would we want to emulate that? Just checking through here. It would need to be a little bit asymmetrical. We could also try to build it out of multiple parts, in theory. Okay. Small radial gyroscope. No. Although, maybe. How small? That's not super small, actually. It kind of works. Kind of. Not really what we're going for. We can leave that be for the moment, though. We have other problems that we need to solve here. So we've got our primary mirror here, but this is a giant mess that is just temporary for the moment and needs to be redone. So we need all of these. So we can think about these in like columns, right? We've got this column of 3 here. We've got this column of 4, this column of 5, this column of 4, and then this column of 3, right? So that's all something that we can think about for this. These 3 need to be folded back 90 degrees and be back here for the launch. These all need to be individually maneuverable. So we can start thinking about how we want to do that. For now, I'm going to remove this octagonal strut, although we might still want to use the octagonal struts. I definitely want to get rid of the modular girder segments and do something a bit different about that. Looking at the actual image, the reference image here of the JWST, I don't really see an image of the back of the primary mirror here. Let me see if I can find one quick. Here's an image of it folded. Okay, let me hop over here. So this is the image of it folded. And we can see these 3 are folded over. I'm not sure where the others are, but and we can kind of see what they've got going on here a little bit. So that's going to be interesting. We can see that it is basically all built on the same width as our remote guidance unit here. So that is something that is good to note. So we're going to need to be able to rotate this direction. We're going to need to be able to rotate it this direction and potentially send it out and back in. So essentially in completely 3D space. So one thing we could think about for that is we can go into our robotics and we could do like one of these hinges. Attach that. I was hoping to get that actual attach point, but it doesn't want to attach there. We could just attach it here for demonstration purposes. That allows us to rotate it this way, which is all well and good. And then we would be able to put it onto potentially like a rotor of some sort, or just a rotation servo. I would want a small rotation servo. These are all massive. Even this one's pretty big, but this one could do. So something like that would allow us to set this rotation, and then we can set this rotation. So that would allow us to rotate it in full 3D space to any angle that we wanted it to be. Like so. Okay. And then we would be able to potentially, like this is where things start to get really big in KSP, right? We would potentially be able to like put a hydraulic cylinder here to do the pushing back and forth, but I think we're going to omit that because of the sheer size of it. So it would end up being something kind of like this that we would then put onto here, which I'm just going to make things a little easier and move this up here so that we can actually snap it on. Kind of like that, and then bring it back over. What direction do we want to rotate that? Not like that. Like that. And then we would want that to go approximately right here. So that sticks out quite a bit, and I don't think it's exactly centered, but that's fine. And then we can have this be whatever angle we need it to be at. So for instance, and these parts won't collide in KSP, so that'll be fine. For instance, for this up here, we want to make it have a bit of a dish shape. So we would end up having this go from its flat position here to be angled slightly like this, so that it would deflect back into our secondary mirror, because we've got our primary mirror here, and that is all dish-shaped. That gets deflected into a secondary mirror that's out here and focuses it into the instruments in the center. That's the way that it works. And we can see that if we go back to our reference images here. This is a slight dish shape here. These are bent outward this direction so that all of the light that is collected by these lenses moves into this, which is a secondary mirror, which deflects it into the instruments in the center here. So that's how that would end up working. Now, I do definitely want to rework this structure here. That is a very big desire at this point. So we're going to hold this off to the side, and I'm going to eliminate all of this. Like so. Now, this center one, I don't know that that one really has to move, but we can allow it to move. And I would like to have this be snapped onto the center, ideally, but you can see here it's awkward. So instead of using these modular girder segments, we're going to take that off of there. Did I just get rid of that? I did. Okay, let's keep that. Thank you. We'll get rid of these, and instead of having these modular girder segments, we're going to eliminate that. We'll keep this one here for the time being. And I want to go for something that allows radial attachments but is much thinner. We could go for like I-beams here. Like this. I would prefer it if we were going for more flat beams. Out of curiosity, snapping off and... yeah, so that could be doable. There's a lot less space there. We could directly attach it on instead of using the octagonal strut and have it go something like this. Now, alignment is going to be important here. If, you know, this was an actual instrument, we'd have to get this very precisely in the exact center. I don't know how concerned about that I really am right now, but we can do something kind of like this. That feels like that works a little bit better. Okay, so we then need to put in a second one of these directly underneath it. My question is, does it get placed? Yes, it gets placed on this section here. So we're going to have to be careful with our positioning to avoid those sections. Got it. One thing we could do is we could just place it like this and then move it up. About like that. That's obviously off-center. So we'd end up placing it something kind of like that. Although we'd want to have maybe a little bit of room to maneuver, these parts will end up clipping together when we start rotating it. Like, for example, this. That will clip together a little bit. So this is going to have to be pushed out ever so slightly in order for that to get into its correct positioning, right? So if this one was straight, which it wouldn't be, this one would have a very, very slight bend to it. Perhaps not that angle. Whoa, okay, we're just grabbing parts at random now. Cool. This would have a very, very slight angle to it, which would be perhaps something like a -2 degree angle. And then this one would have like perhaps a -4 degree angle. Like that, so that it's just slightly bent inward. So this would need to be positioned slightly further out, see? So that they would be flush like that. And that gives us just that ever so slight dish shape there. So that's one way to go about doing that. I don't know how great of a way it is. That said, we would certainly, if I can stop grabbing these parts at random, we would certainly want to launch with these in their default positions. Like so. So you can see that creates a little bit of space between them and even a little bit of overlap here. And that's because we don't have any real way to push this back and forth. If we go into our robotics parts here, the only real way to do that, I believe, is with these hydraulic cylinders. And that's just so big. Like, we're going to be using those hydraulic cylinders down here. Probably not these exact hydraulic cylinders, but for extending out, yeah, not these exact ones. Probably the 1P4s. For extending out the sun shield here. That's almost exactly the correct length, actually. So that would go great. And then, as far as this front section here goes, that, I think, I've had a hard time finding references for it, but I think that folded when it was in the spacecraft. It doesn't look like it extended out like a hydraulic cylinder or anything like that. Just looking at the way that this is set up here, it looks to me, well, this maybe didn't fold. I don't know. I would have to look at an image of it actually folded up. But for now, we can do something kind of like this. So this'll do for the time being. I would like to get some form of... Actually, I have an idea here. Is this the shortest I-beam? That's a pretty long one. That's a long one as well. Yes, it's the shortest I-beam, but we could maybe do it with structural panels. Potentially. Are there structural panels that are more rectangular in shape? No. They're all square. Okay, so we could do it with these I-beams. That is a possibility. The idea at that point boils down largely to this. We grab this, and we put in a hinge of some sort here. And that hinge is used to move this. Unfortunately, with these I-beams being this height, that probably means that we can't use these I-beams. So that is concerning. I want something thin, rectangular. We could use grip strips, but they're, I think, too big. Yeah, broadly speaking, they're too big. Cool. I don't know. I think we're better off with our original plan. So we would get this put in here. I want to move this guy up to be about here. That's with snapping on, and I think snapping on is fine. This guy, I would want to go into the place tool and place it about here, and then we would snap that into position. Okay. And then from here, we would simply lower it a bit with snapping off. I just wanted to snap it to center it. And then we'd just leave a tiny bit of space there between them. And the purpose for that is so that they don't clip together when they form the dish shape. But this has to be pushed out further. So it needs to be like here. And then this one would need to be like here. And then this center one, well, we would need to duplicate this and bring that in, get rid of that, and then take that and put that there, like that. Okay. Then we would snap that into position, like so. Raise it up a little bit, leaving just a small amount of space there. And I feel like there's more space here than is needed. We'd bring that back kind of like this, and there's probably more vertical space there than is needed too. Okay, so what I'd really want to do is I'd want to have these be rotated while we're building this to where we think that they're going to go. I liked that 4 degree, 2 degree thing that we had going on. So something kind of like that. And then we would position these guys to be in approximately their correct positions. So we can see here there's going to be a little bit of clipping, but that's fine. So we position that there, and then we move this guy down ever so slightly. And maybe a little bit more out. Yes. I think down a little bit more. About like that. Okay. So something kind of along the lines of that. And again, we'll reset these back before we launch it. And we'll have to move them into position as part of the deployment process. But then we would bring this guy in here. And that's actually going the correct direction, which is slightly shocking to me. But we'll bring that down, and this one should be 4 degrees. And this one, 2 degrees. Cool. So we'll snap those into position with snapping on. And of course, that's going to completely position them wrong. But that's okay. We just want them centered with that. And then we will move this up to be about here. And then out. Oh, that was not out. And then out to about here. Cool. This one can move directly out. And that actually looks about right. Okay. So that's our center column there. I'm still not sold on this Probodobodine hex, in all honesty. But it gives us the hex shape, and I would like it if there was a darker variant of it, but it is what it is. Okay. So that's all well and good. Now, how are we going to do the second row? Because the second row needs to be turned not just in this direction. And in fact, we could theoretically get rid of these rotation servos. But I think we'll keep them for now. So, as far as the second row of these goes, or the second column, I should say, those will need to be also rotated in this slight dish shape, but they're going to need to be rotated in this way as well. That's a bit of an exaggeration of the curve, of course, but a similar sort of thing there. So, we're going to, for now, duplicate these I-beams and bring them over in mirror symmetry. And I just want to get them rotated correctly, ideally. Is this going to work in mirror symmetry? It's trying to put some of them facing one way and some facing another, I think. This may not end up working in mirror symmetry. Yeah, I think it's not. So we're going to bring this over into radial symmetry, and yeah, that's not going to work either. I think we're just going to have to work without symmetry here. Okay, so we'll position that there. That's a terrible place to position it. We'll bring it around and put it up here instead. Sure. I mean, that positioning is obviously wrong. We'll get that moved into position. We'll snap that, and then just bring it in a little bit here. Cool. And of course, we're going to have to eliminate this guy. And these are going to have to be moved. So, we're going to move these downward. And where do you actually go? You actually go there-ish, but I want you to come this direction a little, I think. For that, I'm going to move this guy out ever so slightly to about there. And then we'll bring this guy up. I'm not too concerned about this final positioning here. And the reason for that is because we don't have it coming this direction yet. And that is necessary here. How are we going to pull that one off? We could ditch the rotation servo here and have this get another one of these guys, these hinges. So that is an option, and we would bring in another hinge here. Okay. And then this would come in and attach, in theory, to that point right there. Okay, now one of these is going to have to be rotated, and I'm going to make it be this one. Rotated 90 degrees like that. And then we bring this guy in, and hopefully it wants to attach. It does not want to attach. It very much does not want to attach with the rotation 90 degrees. That's okay. We'll move this guy out over here, make that a little easier. Okay. We just have to make sure that these are separate so that we can do that. Not exactly that, but something along those lines. Okay, we'll reset this and bring that up. And here is fine for now. Okay, so this one needs to be 2 degrees, or actually, like, is at half this height. So this needs to be at, like, 1 degree. But also it needs to be at, like, 1 degree this direction. So something kind of like that would be what we'd be going for. Okay, so obviously we need to change our positioning of this, and let me just snap that into place right now. And then we will see about positioning that correctly. So we'll bring that back a little bit, and that's pretty close. Yeah, I think that'll do. So I'm going to get rid of these. They are the center variant. Cool. And this guy will be gotten rid of as well. We'll need another one. I wanted to duplicate that. We'll need another one up here. And this one, the vertical change will need to be... See, this is 4 degrees. This is 2 degrees. So this one, the vertical change will need to be 3 degrees. And the horizontal change I'll also make be 3 degrees. Just to give it that very, very subtle dish shape that we've got going on. And then we'll just move this into its correct-ish position. It's too far forward. Now it's too far backward. I think we have a misalignment on something here. But ultimately, I think that's close enough. Cool. So I'm going to duplicate this one up here. And we're going to move that to be down here. We'll snap that into position. Cool. And at this point, we're going to need to have this be the inverse of what it is right now. So I did not mean to grab that. We'll put that away. And we will have this be -3. And this one would be negative... No, this one would still be 3 degrees. It's on this side that it would be -3. Okay. So now we'll just need to move that into position. So obviously it comes down a bit and goes in a bit. Close. I think we need to come this direction. That's about right. Cool. There we go. And we'll get ourselves one more here. So that will come in down here. And we'll just snap that into position as well. Just to give us a stable reference point of where this thing is. Yeah, that'll be fine. And this one will need to be rotated. Oh, this is actually too far out, isn't it? Don't snap, please. Then we're going to bring that in. Okay. I feel like if that's in... This needs to come in slightly as well. And now we have a gap here. So this guy comes in slightly. And then this one comes in slightly. Like that. So we're a little bit more flush. Cool. Okay, now we need to be at the inverse of this on the y-axis. So this is at 3, so this will need to be at -3, which it is. And then this would be at 3, and this would be at 3. So this one's at 3. Oh, this one is wrong, isn't it? It needs to be at 1 and 1. Or 1 and -1, technically. Yes. Like that. Okay, so we'll get that moved into its proper position here. Needs to be up a little bit and maybe a little out. Actually, I feel like it needs a little bit in. And this guy almost certainly has to come in. Ever so slightly there. Cool. There's a gap here. So I want to move this guy in and a little bit up. Still needs to go in, I think. Looking at this here. Okay. That'll do just fine there. And this guy is at its correct angle, so we just need to move it into position. We'll move it approximately like this, and it's obviously too far out. Cool. I think this guy is too far out as well, and that probably means this one is too. Okay. That's pretty decent there. So at this point, we can duplicate that and put that over on the other side. Something not like that. That's exciting. Let's try to get that flipped all the way around. I'm always confused about what direction to go here. Actually, this way, I believe... no. Not that way at all. This way. But we will need to move that I-beam this direction. Cool. We'll snap that into position. And then move that in a bit. Because that's just a mirror of this side, right? So... just a mirror. Hilarious. It looks like we need to bring it back this way ever so slightly and have it be positioned kind of like that. I don't necessarily love all the little bits sticking out, but that's the best we've got. So that's our immobile mirror section there. I'm going to save this as JWST. There we go. This is going to be quite a project. There's no doubt about that. So at this point, we need a version of these that folds back. That hinge is huge. I'm looking for a hinge that's kind of like that, but is maybe not that big. Maybe this size would be okay. So if we were to put this in, man, that thing's big. Okay. So we would need it to be rotated, not necessarily like this, but more like this. And we'd have to position that. This thing is almost certainly too big. But it would be something kind of like this. I don't really like the way this sticks out the back. We can maybe make it work with one of these hinges instead. Or maybe even that's way too big. Okay, let's get rid of this one, and let's just attach this in with a single hinge over here. That's going the wrong way, so we're going to have to rotate that. Okay. And now we're going to need to duplicate, like, this guy and attach that kind of like this. Now, obviously, that positioning isn't exactly what we want. But we can move that up a little bit and then move this guy up ever so slightly. Try to get that a bit more aligned. And this would be the unfolded position. And then the folded position would be here. Right? So this has to fold up. And we only need 3 on this, so that's fine. Get rid of that. Fold that back in, and we can start thinking about what we want for positioning here. So we're going to need this guy to be positioned up here and in a decent chunk. Kind of like that. Kind of. Up and out. And as far as the angle here goes, it needs to be a mix between these two angles. So 3 and 1. So this would be 2 degrees. And then 3 and 1. So this would also be, wait, was that 3 and 1? Positive. Okay. So this would be 2 degrees. Like that? That might not be what we want, actually. Yeah, I think I'd want this to be like 4 degrees because it's on the outside. And then this would be like, if this one is 3 degrees, I think 2 degrees is correct here. So then this would get moved to be about here. I don't love this plate sticking up here, and we might do something about that. But that would be approximately the correct position for that one. As far as this one goes, it would be in between these two, in theory. So that's 1. This one would probably be either 2, probably the same, actually, as this one, which is 4 degrees. So we'll have that be 4 degrees. And then this would be in between these two, 1 and -1. So in theory, this one would be basically just flat, which makes sense because it's right on this same level. So that'll work. We move this up over here and then in over this way. A little bit more height, I think. We need to go in further. A little less height, actually. That's clipping in pretty far. Is this clipping in too? It is. Okay, so we'll bring that out, and we'll reposition this guy a bit. Just looking at the height for right now, this height is approximately correct, and so is that positioning. Okay, so we'll use that as a reference point for right now, and we'll just go edge on here approximately, and a little bit more height here. Okay, that'll do for the time being. We can always adjust that a little bit later on. I definitely see that this is not out enough, so we can do something kind of like that. Cool. We might be able to get all of this onto a single I-beam, looking at this. And I think we can. So I'm going to take that out, get rid of that, and then we're going to put in this singular I-beam here. I want this rotated very differently from this. Okay, what direction do we need to rotate from here? We'll get there eventually. Trial and error is definitely not the way to go, but there we go. We'll get that on there, and then I'm going to ditch this I-beam. Okay. So now this is going to be where all of these parts are going to be routed from. We'll bring this down to its correct height, or correct-ish height. There we go. And this guy will come on over to... well, it can just be mounted here. And we'll place that over this way. Cool. Now it needs to be pushed out this direction a little bit. About like so. I think this one might be too far out. And this one comes out a little bit further. Well, now this one needs to come out a little bit further too. Ish. This is, of course, the complicated part of the JWST, or a complicated part. There are many complicated parts of the JWST. Yeah, these are both slightly too far out. In terms of how far out they need to go, it needs to go there and there. Cool. So that'll do. And then we need one more down here. So I'll duplicate this. The question is, can we lower this enough? It would be a bit free-floating, which isn't necessarily ideal. The answer is not exactly. We can get it there. So we're going to have something down here. Okay. So we can get a structural something, like a cubic octagonal strut, maybe? Maybe even 2. And place that there. And then we can bring it in. And it's going to have to go inside of the cubic octagonal strut a little bit. That's fine. We'll look at it from this angle to figure that out. It's not the correct angling, of course. So the vertical hinge here needs to be negated. That is 2 degrees. So this needs to be at negative 2 degrees. No, this needs to be at 2 degrees. This vertical hinge is at 2 degrees as well. Huh. This must have gotten flipped upside down. Okay, that's fine. 2 degrees is good here, and then we need to be at the same here, which is 4 degrees, which we are. So that's perfect. Now we can position this guy, and you can see here we're a bit off on our cubic octagonal strut. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this cubic octagonal strut just to make that look a little bit better. And we'll bring that in to be about here for the time being. We're going to have to push it out slightly. I want to... we're definitely going the wrong way here. This actually needs to be at negative 4. Again, I'm pretty sure we got this flipped upside down at some point. But yeah, that is correct. Cool. So we will get this pushed out a little bit to be here. This is, I think, at the wrong angle. No, that's at 4 degrees. Does that need to be... Okay. Just checking that. I think that undid multiple steps there. That's exciting. We're going to bring this back a bit. Yeah, this actually does need to be at a slightly different angle, which is fine. We will go ahead and change that to be negative 4. That's correct. Cool. Okay. So we'll bring this back out a bit to here. That'll be fine. It'll need to come up ever so slightly, which I will do that here. Actually, no. I'll do that here. Cool. And then it needs to come out a bit, I think. It's a little bit more angled than this one is. Maybe that's correct. Yeah, this is definitely upside down from these other ones. I'm going to flip it. There we go. Cool. So this needs to be at 4 degrees and this at 2. So this would be at negative 2 now. That's correct. And this would be at 4 degrees. That's about correct. And I'm just making up those numbers for the record. I don't have like actual JWST numbers here. So that's much better in terms of positioning there. And then this one, I feel like it needs to be brought in a little bit this way. Like 7 degrees-ish, but that might be too much. It was at 4. Oh, I accidentally got rid of that. Sure. But that's fine. I do want to bring this guy back a little bit this way because it looks like it's ever so slightly sticking out there. Okay, that'll do. And the fun part about that, of course, is we can always grab this hinge, and for launch, we can fold it back. Now, I'm not sure how much space savings that actually is, but we can do it. We can do it. For JWST, they probably didn't have quite as much space here, but that's fine. So we're going to need to duplicate this and position that on the other side as well. So I will go ahead and do so. I want that about like so. And we will position it there for now. The only thing we should have to move here is the vertical position. And maybe a bit of horizontal as well. Something kind of like that. There's a little bit over here. I mean, I can endlessly tweak this forever. This is upside down, but that's fine. That is completely okay. So At this point, we would bring this back to negative 90 degrees, this back to negative 90 degrees. And that would be more of our launch status, although I would want to have all of these not necessarily be in their curved state. I think it's fine to launch them that way. So there's the primary mirror setup. Let's go ahead and put this back at 0. There we go. And then we need to set up the secondary mirror. So, how exactly are we going to do that? Well, we can duplicate this guy. And it would go like somewhere around... This is probably too big, actually. So rather than duplicating that, I would just duplicate like this guy. It would go around here-ish. And then we'd need something that comes up in a tripod fashion. So it would come from... Actually, let's take a look quick at our reference images here. So it comes from the top and from these two hexes. Okay. Good to know. So with that in mind, we are going to take it from here and here and from here. Cool. So... For temporary, we could have like an I-beam up here just to mark where these are going to be. An I-beam there, an I-beam here, and an I-beam here. Okay, and then this would be rotated down to be about here. This would be rotated up and in. Kind of like that. These are very temporary. And this would be rotated in and up as well. Approximately like this. Right? Approximately. Kind of like that. And then where they all meet is where the secondary mirror would go. Now, I don't think I-beams are necessarily the best building material for this. So let's go shopping for another building material. I mean, structural is usually the best place to find that sort of thing. Ideally, I would like to have it be secured just with, like, struts. That is a potential option. How far out? If we were to mount this here, how far out can we move it? Probably not far enough. Yeah, not far enough. Okay. I think that these I-beams are a little larger than I'd like them to be. And this is probably not exactly the angle that I would want them to be at either. So I'd want them to be like here. That's maybe a little too low. Actually, no, that's about right. And then this one be brought down a little bit more. About like that. Now, this is an ugly mess, obviously, and it's made out of I-beams, which is not necessarily what we want. So, let's see what else we've got here for options. But one thing we could do is we could move this guy over here, place it on the I-beam, and try to cover this mess a little bit. That is a possibility. Like that. But I think that they're just fundamentally too large. I want something that is smaller. But similar. Smaller but similar. So let's see what options we have here. Let's go through some of these parts, and this is stock-ish in terms of parts. Helicopter blades, or just propeller blades in general, potentially. Do they have an attach point on this end? I don't think that really works. I don't think that really works at all. Okay. What other parts would we potentially have to be able to get this section done? Because I do not like the way that the I-beams are looking. And we would probably want some way to fold that up. I believe it swings into place. on the actual JWST, but I'm not 100% on that one. Okay, so options. Our options are pretty limited, honestly, for this type of part. Good to know. I would prefer to just anchor it with struts. That would be the ideal. Sadly, like, the way that I would want to do that would be like the strut comes from here and just connects like that. And then this part gets completely removed. But unfortunately, this is attached here, and we don't really have a way to do that. We could have only one I-beam, and then these two are removed and are just struts. That's an option. So we would have this thing approximately here. Probably not this exact gyroscope. I would actually probably use like another probodobodyne hex here and then rotate that to be approximately straight. And we'd want that to be on the level of this and moved so that this is attached more like that. I'd get rid of this part. And then we would want this to be angled slightly differently, which would necessitate changing this angling. I'm just looking at our straight line here. That's approximately correct. Not entirely, but approximately. And then we would want this to be angled a bit more like that. And moved kind of like this. And then we can have struts coming in from down below. So from here to here. Apparently it doesn't like that. Let's try from here to here. No. From here to on this side. No, it doesn't like that. Okay, that works. And then from here to here, kind of like that. I would like to remove the I-beam and have that also be struts. I would also like this to be like silver because that's a primary mirror there. And then that reflects it back into here. Like that. Cool. I don't like the I-beam. I don't really see an alternative to it at this point. So that's exciting. I apologize for that. I need to be quiet while I'm talking. So yeah, I don't necessarily see a replacement for the I-beam there. And I'm not entirely sure how I can fix that. We'll leave that be for the moment, and we'll call this done-ish. But I wonder, with this here, if we had this attached to a robotic part here, like hypothetically a hinge that was like right here, and then we attached this guy onto that, not exactly like this, but more like this. And then we were able to drop that hinge into place. Like that. That would mean that we were able to, for the purposes of launch, fold this up, kind of like this. But I think that means that we can't use struts here anymore. Because if we have that strutted, well, not necessarily like that, but if we have this strutted together to be hypothetically like here, and then this strutted to be hypothetically here. I didn't want to go there, but hypothetically like this. That would be the way we'd want that to go, and in the VAB, that would work fine. Because we can just swing this thing all around. But I'm pretty sure, and that's definitely too low, We'd want this to be about at like 15 degrees, I think, ish. And this guy would have to be rotated and made more flat. About like that, which would mean that it would have to be moved in a little bit. Maybe even a bit up. To be kind of like this. And then that would mean that this would have to be rotated a bit more. This is going to be a little fiddly, but we'll figure this out. Bring that down to about 16 degrees is pretty decent. 17 degrees, something like that. It definitely needs to be a little lower, doesn't it? Looking at this straight on, this thing is not straight on this way, which it needs to be. So we do that, and it's not straight on this direction either. So we'll just line that up a little bit. It wanted to flip there. Nice gimbal locking. Okay. And I think it needs to be slightly lower. But that's probably close enough. But if we were to put this out on the pad and try to move this hinge here, I don't think that the hinge will actually move. And I would like to move the hinge down and not have it be floating there. Kind of like that. Okay. So if we were to try this, I'm pretty sure that the struts will make it so that we can't move that hinge. Let's double check that, because that would kind of break the purpose of having the hinge there. But visually, I'd prefer the struts. Definitely. I definitely prefer the struts visually. And it's going to wobble a bit, but that's fine. So let's see how this goes. Yeah, it ends up moving this, and it can't move the struts. That's exactly what I expected. So we revert that back, and we're going to have to come up with a different plan for that. Which is unfortunate. Hang on. What about fuel lines? Those don't provide that kind of stability. They're a little bigger, but we could make them be black to maybe not look quite as fuel liney. And position that about like so. Make that one be black as well. Or, well, because this is gray, probably make them be gray. So like metal. Is that then movable? I think it would be. Let's find out. Okay. It waggles around a bit. That's a good sign. Fantastic. So we can fold that in down here. I mean, it'll clip through if we fold it all the way. But then we can bring it back up to around negative 20, 27 degrees, something kind of like that. Well, we've got some gravity here, but we can line it up. So that would work just fine. Fantastic. So let's revert that back. And at this point, we've got 2 segments left to work on here. That is our primary scope, I would say, basically complete. It's not perfect, but it gets... So with our primary scope, like our primary mirror, secondary mirror, and instruments up here complete, then we would come down over here and start working on our sun shield. So this would start with no extension. And we need like 4 layers of sun shield here, and then we can make our satellite bus down here. And then we can launch this thing. Well, we'll need to make an Ariane 5 and launch it, but that'll be easy enough. So the question then becomes, how are we going to do the sun shield? I don't know, is the answer. That is the definite answer to that one. I don't know how we're going to do this sun shield. So the way that it was done in reality was these were folded up. And this was all like an almost fabric. And then they extended this out like that. I'm not sure what they did for the front portions and the back portion, but it was something along the lines of that for the sides. that gets extended out and gets tensioned, and then the 4 layers separate. Here, I'll hop over to display capture once I switch over here, and yeah. So we've got this here. This is a telescoping boom that heads out and tensions the sun shield that separates it out like this. So then they've got these sections here, and then it's just a whole thing. It's a whole thing. And then there's a spacecraft bus, which is probably simple enough. So looking at this, we can see the solar panel here. I believe this is a radiator here. There are multiple radiators up over this way that we can see coming out like this, which is fine. We can definitely do that. Radiators here, and then just stuff in here with a thruster block right here. So, yeah, the bus seems easy enough. And the Ariane 5 does as well. The question that I have is, how are we going to make the sun shield? That is going to be interesting. I don't really have a way to do that in my head. We have these guys here, but as far as, like, tensioning it goes, I don't know how I'm going to do that one. So, let's get rid of this for the moment, and let's think here for a bit. Do we have anything that, like, dynamically fills in? Kind of the way that we have this fuel duct dynamically changing its length. That would be nice. But I'm not sure that we have such a thing. If we did, the way that I would want to do this is that I would want to have, like, a something kind of like these I-beams, actually. I would want to have something like that out over here, rotated like, not exactly like that, but rotated something like this and positioned about like so. I'd want that to be roughly centered. And then it would connect from here to like here. So if we were to emulate that with a strut, obviously a strut isn't going to work here, but we would have it be something like that, and then we would extend it out, and we'd have another connector, ideally, that would be something like this. Like that. So we can see a rough shape of what we're going for by doing this. Like so. Can we make this be mirror symmetry and put that on? Mirror symmetry. Kind of. We can kind of do that. Okay. So we then bring this guy back, reposition it a bit. It doesn't have to be exactly centered, but about like that. And then we redo this strut connecting it over here, and then this strut connecting it over here. So that would be the overall shape of it, right? And then this strut would connect up like here. And that would be layer 1. And then we'd have layer 2, layer 3, layer 4. And then our satellite bus would go down here. So that would be the overall shape. And that would then be slightly awkward. But yeah, we can see essentially how that would end up working. Now, we could theoretically do that, actually. Because the parts clip together and don't collide, what we can do here is we can go into structural, and, well, we can grab, like, one of these. Rotate it to be like, if I can get these the way I want them to be rotated, the opposite of this. There we go. Rotate them like that. And then bring that in again. Apparently they need to be re-rotated. That's obnoxious. But bring them in to be like that. Then, when this is brought in, not the traverse rate. When this is brought in, they clip together like that. Slightly longer. And I'd want to smooth this out. This is pretty uneven as it is right now. But something kind of like that would be the plan. I would want to grab this guy and move it back to be about here. Like so. That's slightly better. So that could work for this direction. We can fold this down, and I'm going to go ahead and set this at our launch angle, which is going to be like negative 80 degrees. Like that. And then I'm going to set these at our launch angle as well, which is negative 90, and that one's only kind of attached, but that's okay. Negative 90. So that would be our launch setup there, right? And then we have this here. The question then becomes, how can we get the rest of this done? That angle is clearly incorrect, but I do want to move this strut connector to be more like here. Like that. Okay, we'll use that as a guide for our strut connectors, and we can also see that the height on this is a little bit iffy, but that's okay. We can work on that. So, at this point, we need something that approximates this angle. That kind of approximates it. That is the white variant. Actually, the silver variant is okay. So we'd need to bring this in again. For now, we can put it up over this side. That does not approximate the angle on this side. Okay, so we would need something with a sharper angle. We would want to... Are these all equilateral? They don't look that way here, but that's because we're at a different angle. Okay, that's not equilateral. Cool. So we can bring this in. That's way too not steep of an angle. Way too... Words are completely abandoning me at this time. But that's not the right angle for sure. We need this angle to come in a little bit differently, and I do want to get this flattened down a little bit, so let's go ahead and do that right now. I want to bring this in, and it looks like it needs to come up a little bit, I think. Yes. In fact, let's snap it into position. Cool. Snap that. Snap this. Snap that. Cool. And then we can bring it in ever so slightly for each of these, because there is a very small gap there. Cool. Something kind of like that. Much better. This guy I would like to bring out and this way. Okay. Kind of like that. Now we need to figure out how we're going to fill this area. That's going to be real interesting. And we can see it's symmetrying over here, so that's fine. We can duplicate this and put it over on this side as well. And we would, of course, need to move that into position a bit. Approximately like that. Cool. And then from here, we could use... these are M1x1s. So from here, we could potentially use these guys, but we can see that's definitely not the angle that we're looking for. So what angle are we looking for? Potentially, yes. This angle. So we need to reposition that guy to be about here. Cool. And then we could duplicate this and bring that in again. About like that. Now that's clipping together for sure. But, and we're kind of dipping down here, we would want to change that for sure. Bringing this up a bit. And this guy would need to come up a bit as well. And there's going to be some definite clipping here when we put this thing together. There's no doubt about that. But we'll just bring this out ever so slightly. and in like that. Okay. So as we bring this in, and I'm going to get rid of this strut connector, it's no longer necessary as a guide. So we'll get rid of that, and we'll bring this on in. You can see it's going to clip together in some really awkward ways, but that's reasonably okay, I feel like. Now, this is definitely a little lower than it necessarily wants to be. So I'm going to just move this up until we start to see this clip through. Like that. Okay, and then we can move these down to be at approximately that same level. Like that. This obviously needs to be moved in a bit. There we go. And down a bit maybe. No. This way. Cool. And then we can duplicate this again and bring that in here. And now we can safely get rid of this, because this panel is now acting as that. So then we can duplicate from here and position this. I think that was the wrong thing that I duplicated. What do we have here? Just this panel? So yeah, it should be duplicating from here. Probably the wrong rotation then. Cool. So we bring this in. We've got a bit of a wonky situation going on here, but that's fine. We can simply get rid of that, and that should, in theory, be okay. We'll raise this up a little bit, and this guy needs to come in slightly. This guy go out slightly. Cool. Now this is a bit of a problem here. We'll see if we can fix that with maybe something like, that's too small of a structural panel there, I think. Too big. We want one that's about right here. Or just one of these. No, that angle isn't correct. Okay. This is going to be a little awkward to get this corner done. It might be a little strange. Yeah, definitely not that size. This one's too big, too. There's a structural pylon here. That's not what we want. This one's about right. So actually, let's get that guy in there. That's not technically attached. Okay. We'll get that guy in there, switched over to silver. Yes. Yes. We've got a bit of a height issue here, which creates one over here. Okay. And we've got some altitude stuff going on over there. But overall, this gets us approximately the correct shape. Now, when we collapse this down, weird things are going to happen. It is, I think, a little bit more collapsed, maybe. Maybe. But one thing that we could also do is we could duplicate our telescoping hydraulic cylinders and have another set of them. Now, this is not how the actual JWST works, but we could have another set of these here with another I-beam and have part of this out here be attached to that. And I think that would collapse better for Kerbal purposes since this is all solid, unlike JWST. So that's definitely going to be an option for us there. Okay, so we'll put in this I-beam here, and this rotation is not what I want. We'll do something kind of like that. And move this guy in a little bit here. That's centered now. And we'll move it up. Actually, that's not centered at all. We'll center it and move it to there. Okay. Now, some bits of this are going to be attached here now. So we will go ahead and remove, I think, this section as well as this section for the time being. This obviously is the wrong height. We'll just squish that on down a bit and get this positioned a little bit better, because that position is pretty wrong as it is. There we go. And move that down. Okay. Then we're going to use a single structural panel here and position that. One of these angles is the correct angle. There we go. We'll position that right here. Okay. Now, this should be a little bit longer. So I'm going to extend this out, and I think we only need to extend this with a 1p2. We'll give that a go and see if that feels correct in terms of length. I think it needs a 1p4. So we'll put that there and bring this guy in. It doesn't need to be fully extended. An extension of around 1.5 is, I think, enough. So we'll set the extension limit down to 1.5. I guess 1.51. And that seems about right. We'll need to make this guy be insulated. Okay. So, from here, I want to grab a panel kind of like this. And rotate it not at all like that. Let's see. What rotation do we actually want here? One of these, probably. Actually, I'm just going to grab this structural panel for right now. We'll place that there. We now have an arrow. Cool. And we're going to... No, I didn't want to grab it. We are going to move it to be down this way. This angle is not correct, is it? No, not correct in the slightest. So that's not going to work. We're going to need... I think it is going to have to be this panel. So I'm going to drop one of those there. I'm going to ditch this panel just to be on the safe side there. Okay. That's the same angle. Cool. So, in that case, we may have to get rid of this. And actually, these struts should not exist. Okay. Sure. So in that case, we should definitely duplicate our structural panels here. And, I wish it would bring it in at the correct rotation. That would be awfully nice. Okay. There we go. So we're going to get this done. Again, this is not how the actual JWST works, but there's going to be some differences here because of Kerbal. And we'll just bring that in to be, I think, about here-ish. We're going to need to change the altitude. Okay. Something kind of like that. And then we can duplicate that and place it about here. Cool. Bring that down a little bit. And that'll just... It'll need to come this way as well. And I think in. Close enough for now. We can adjust it a little bit more later on, but that'll do for the moment. Okay. And then we'll duplicate all of this. I don't think we'll need all 4 of them. No. We'll need about, well, 3 of them. Like that. And then we've got a bit of a height differential here we can see. So that's fine. We can tune that by moving this guy up to be there. Now, of course, the real JWST has a bit of a bend in it that we're not going to simulate here. Just bringing that down slightly, which means that we need to bring this up slightly. Okay. And, well, that's ugly. Let's move that guy over. Cool. About like that, and then down a wee bit. And in. Cool. Up slightly. And there we go. That'll do for now. And of course, we're not attached over here. So I expect this thing to be like flopping all over when we put it on the pad right now. It's going to be interesting. I'm not entirely certain how we're going to handle that. But we need to get this connected in over here. And we can see that this angle as it exists is about right. We can fine tune that as we get a little bit closer. I'm going to bring in one more set of these structural panels here. And we'll see how that clips together. The answer is reasonably well. Until we get over here. But we can ditch this and fine-tune the positioning of this guy a little bit. So we can bring all of these back over here. Like so. And then bring this in to line up about like that. Cool. And then this guy would actually need to come like this way. This would want to be detached for this, which would be awfully nice, but we'll just try to get all of this lined up a bit. Okay. Bringing that out. This in. Kind of like that. And then this guy would have to be moved. So I think for now, what we may end up doing is just leaving... No, I didn't want to remove that one. I wanted to move it slightly. Just bring this in kind of like that. Okay. So for now, that's all we've got there. I want to duplicate this and bring it over to this side. And of course, we're going to have to duplicate this 4 times. But once we have this first one done, the rest will go very quickly. So there we go. Cool. As far as this goes here, we could definitely duplicate some of these panels here and position them in this way-ish. They'll need to be moved, of course. And I fully expect this thing to, like, explode the moment we put it on the pad. That is definitely expected here. But we'll just put that here for now. And then I'll duplicate it again and put it on this side. Get that moved. About like that. And these are all going to clip together wildly. And cause all sorts of problems. For sure. We'll get those solved in a bit, but for now, I want to drop that down ever so slightly. It doesn't have to be exactly even, but for now, that'll do. And then we will duplicate this again and position it about here. Like so-ish. Now, this one doesn't have to exist, so we'll get rid of that. And then we'll duplicate this and position it about... Come on, you can do it. I saw it. Boy, it does not want to put an edge on there. Let's try that again. There we go. Now it's letting me put an edge on. Fantastic. Okay, we're going to bring that in, and about here, we can get rid of this guy. This is a giant mess, of course. It was always going to be the case. So now we're going to need to work on this bit here. And, I didn't mean to grab that, but we'll work on the, like, altitude of this a bit here and there. As we see bits that are very wrong. But for now, that'll do. There's actually some quasi-cool greebling going on there. I don't know. That's kind of neat. But we will, for now, work on getting structural panels put into here. So the question is, at this point, what angle do we need to get here? We might have to truncate this by, like, 1 panel. And also, just how wacky does this thing look when we untension the heat shield, or the sun shield, rather. is a little wacky, but it's mostly very condensed. Okay. It's going to be quite the fairing we're going to have to put this thing in. I can tell you that right now. But we'll see how that ends up going. Okay. So here's our sun shield here for now. And I definitely do want to take some more structural panels. We need to... This is actually an interesting way to put that. Yes, this would work. So we put that there, and then we would need to move it and clip it in back this way. And just have it come in kind of like that. This, of course, creates a bit of an issue. So we would want to move this guy back out. And then move basically this entire structure in. Like that. Then we can duplicate this and bring it in approximately here. We would need to move it into position, move it up a little bit and back this way and over this direction. There we go. Maybe up a bit more. A bit more. Okay. Duplicate that one more time. And we can just position it there for now, because we can just bring this in like so. Okay, a little further in and down a bit for sure. And we're a little bit off over here. So it would be ideal to have it there. What we're going to do is we're going to position this here and grab... right there. And we're going to grab this, as we did previously, and just move that back ever so slightly. That's breaking this one. Right, that would be the case. Okay. We may just have to call this corner good enough. It's going to be awkward, no matter any way we slice it. But that could do the trick. It's pretty close, all things considered. That is pretty close. Fascinating. Now, if we put this on the pad, how many explosions do we have, and what directions do all of the bits of the sun shield go? Let's find out. This is going to be not great, I'm pretty sure. Bits are going to be waggling around all over. So we'll have to figure out how we want to secure that for the launch. That's going to be a challenge. That's not as waggly as I thought it would be. But yeah, we've got bits sagging here. That's unsurprising. We could try to put some supports over here. That's a possibility. It's going to be towards the center that it's always going to be weakest, just by the nature of what we've got going on here. And I don't think we can actually... did I change the traverse rate? I did. Okay. So it compresses down like this, which isn't, you know, ideal. But are these physics-less parts? That would be nice if they were. If they didn't cause drag. I have no idea if they do or not. That'll be interesting for sure. But this is working better than I anticipated, for sure. Let's revert that back, and we're going to have to put a couple of layers of this on. So, to that end, what am I building? I am building the James Webb Space Telescope. Or an approximation of the James Webb Space Telescope. So let's go ahead and get the sun shield detensioned here. And we're going to put some beams down here to provide some support. So we could go for like these beams or these beams. That's a little too long, I feel like, although it's not necessarily. If we were to do something like this, That would provide a decent amount of support there. And then on the other side, we could do something like this-ish, although I'd want to snap it into position. We'll have snap on for both of these when we snap them in. There we go. And then bring this out to be something kind of like this. So both of them would provide some level of support, right? Something kind of like that. Okay. Now we could have these not come off of the remote guidance unit. That's an option. We could have them like up here instead. And I think that would be a good plan. So we do that, and we can ditch the remote guidance unit. Unfortunately, that's our root part right now. So that's a bit awkward. But we can duplicate all of, well, everything. I didn't mean to duplicate everything, but that would make sense that that would be what that duplicated. Okay, let's reroute our parts right now to be this hex as our root. And now we can ditch this. And that also means that we can now duplicate this if we wanted to, and have our layers be that far separate. I don't know if we want them to be this far separate. I also want to get rid of that for the moment, because I want to make these a little bit higher here. We need to turn off snapping for that. I want to have these be like here. Like that. Now these I-beams are pretty tall. And that's our limiting factor of how tightly we can compress this right now. So, we're currently using the height of a modular girder segment. You can change the root part using the reroute tool. Yep, we already did that. So, that's our major issue right now as far as packing these layers together a bit more. So we could definitely do that. I mean, it'd be a little complicated. It'd be a lot easier to just have more space between the sunshield layers like this. But that's obviously way too much space. And we have room that we can pare this down. So we're going to do so. Let's redo that. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to re-extend out our sunshield here, retension that, and get that all into position. That's the wrong one. There we go. So with that all out, oh, this is slightly broken now. We'll address that in a bit. So for the moment, I want to grab this, and I want to remove this I-beam. I want to make this be a like cubic octagonal strut instead, and bring this to be here, because we need this to be a lot less space, right, between these. So we're going to move this to be about here-ish. Then we're going to grab this part again. Did this just break on me? That's exciting. Apparently it did, but we'll bring this in to be something kind of like, well, where does that actually go? Like that. And then this attached on. I can't believe this actually broke on me. Very rude. Very, very rude. So this part here was what attached here, right? Okay. So it was something along the lines of that. And then this went over here somewhere. Let's see here. One of these. Kind of like this-ish. Like over here. Okay, we'll come back to that. As long as we have this shape, that's the difficult part. We can fill this back in later on. So I'm going to detach this here, and then detach this. And we're going to do the same thing for this section. We'll put in a cubic octagonal strut here, rotated like so. And just checking our height here, this looks approximately correct. Okay, so we will grab this guy and bring it in to... Where's our rotation at? There we go. Like that. Okay, so this will need to be moved slightly, but that's fine. It can be brought in like that. And this is now slightly too long, but we can bring this up in height. Okay. Something kind of like this. But we're going to need to have this target extension be slightly less long. So we're going to bring that back to be about here. And then we're going to modify this position ever so gently. And this is just going to generally be a little bit awkward. Right here at this very end. This corner, there's not a lot we can do about that. Okay, so we need to take this panel here. Oh, these panels are not exactly centered. That would... No, don't do that. That would help if we exactly centered the panels. So we're going to bring that over... like so. These are at slightly different heights, which is weird because we're in mirror symmetry, but okay. It's probably good enough, and we'll call that good. We can duplicate this guy and put him right here. Fantastic. That'll need to be lowered a bit and positioned over this way. And then all we need to do is fill in this. Can we do that with a single part? That would be nice if we were able to do that with like one of these larger structural triangles. It doesn't quite fill it. Okay, that's fine. We're just going to duplicate these guys here and position them not like this, more like this. There we go. And we'll grab that, move that out over here, and position it about like this, moving it down slightly. And then we'll duplicate that again and do the same thing. So this is definitely going to need its supports. There's no doubt about that. But we can do that, and then we can duplicate this over here, doing the same exact thing. And this is our sun shield nearly complete here. Cool. We'll duplicate it one more time. And that was not necessarily what I wanted to do, but we'll place it right there. Cool. Bring that down in height, and bring this down in height a bit as well. Okay, so it's not perfect, but that should do. We're then going to bring this I-beam down to here, and looking at this extension, can we use one of these guys instead? They're a little too tall, so I think we're going to get rid of these in their entirety, and then we're going to duplicate this guy, and we're just using this for support at the moment. This is very much not the angle this needs to be at. Okay, now we need to try to get it in here. That's going to be exciting. Cool. 1 and 2. Now, we don't necessarily want this to go out that far. So maybe out to here. Let's see how that goes. Even that's maybe a little bit far, but that should do the trick. Cool. So I'm going to duplicate that, and we're going to rotate it to be like this. But I don't know what that's actually connecting to. I want it to attach to this guy. Okay, I don't know what that's connecting to. Sure. I really do want that connected to this. Spicy. Okay. We're going to attempt to do something kind of like that then. What is that connected to? The far side? I don't know. That's a little insane. You know what? Let's do it up here. And, it's like attaching in the center, I guess. But we can do it up here and then move it into position. Should be fine. So we'll do that. Let's just go ahead and snap it into the center. There we go. And now we'll move this down to try to support this. Okay. And that's really all the more support it should need in theory. Let's put this on the pad and see how it sags. I do expect it to sag a bit. So what do we got? As soon as it loads in, there's a lot of parts here. It's currently not responding, but we'll wait for it to respond. There we go. Honestly, this out here is pretty bad. We can work on that. But in the center, it's not too bad. I mean, it sags straight through these, actually. So those don't actually help. And why would they? They wouldn't, under any circumstances, because it can just clip through parts. I don't know why I'm even trying to do this. Okay, so we may just have to hope it goes to its correct position in orbit. We could test that. Without any supports here, we put it back on the pad and we just cheat it into orbit and see what it does as far as where those parts end up wanting to sit. That's something we can definitely do. And then we're going to have 4 of these. So it's going to be a lot of parts in general. But let's just go ahead and put this into orbit for now and see where it sits in 0G. It looks like it settles to the build position. So that's absolutely fine. We can definitely see that it clips, or it looks substantially different out here than it does in the VAB. These parts are definitely a different material. That's probably okay for now. We'll revert that back to the vehicle assembly. And can we change these? Let's see, they're insulated right now. We could try to make them all silver. That's probably our best bet, actually. That's basically what the JWST is. I don't know why these are so bright when they're silver, but sure. We can have all of this switch over to silver. That's going to be a little bit tedious, but it'll be okay. Cool. And we can definitely see that there's some wackiness ensuing, but overall, as far as the sun shield goes, this was going to be the hard part of this build, in my opinion, and I think we've basically got it at this point. So these triangles are already silver, and they look very weird. There's no doubt about that. But let's get this set up as silver, and these as well. We'll need to make sure that all of this is set up as silver. In the VAB, it seems like it loads in like this, and in the actual game, it loads in that material differently. Okay. So I think that's all of those. And then we've got these, but that should be fine. This guy? There might be one up over here. Okay. We'll let that be for the moment. And I wouldn't mind moving this entire section up a little bit. I wish we could multi-select, but we can't. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm just going to turn snapping on, and we're just going to move this up to about that point. With snapping, we should be able to very easily get them all to the same level. And that then means that we can duplicate this and bring that down to here and have 2 per layer. And that would be great. So we would then duplicate this as well, and then we would snap that into position. Like so, and like so. I think we would maybe want this to be a little bit lower, like this level. And then in theory... Oh, this didn't fully duplicate. Okay, that would help. Let's bring this in like that and like that. There we go. And that was with snapping on, so these angles are actually wacky. Let's fix that. There we go. And now we'll set our height correctly by turning snapping back on. There we go. And there we go. Cool. And that gives us 2 layers. Now, there's a lot more space here than there is in the actual JWST. In the actual JWST, it's a lot closer together, but this is close enough for Kerbal work, I think. Then we can just duplicate that like so. And that gets us our 4 sun shields. And all of them are completely retractable-ish for some definitions of completely retractable. And not exactly the way JWST works, but that's fine. We also can't put this quite into the same orbit as JWST, for the record. KSP Vanilla does not simulate Lagrange points, so that's not going to be a thing, but we can bring all of these back, and these as well. This is going to be a wacky fairing, there's no doubt about it, but we're almost ready to launch this thing. So we'll bring that target extension down and this target extension down too. Okay, I'm hoping these are physics-less parts and we could clip them through a fairing. That would be awfully nice. Of course, the actual JWST, this is all essentially a fabric. And so when you have these down like this, it's not that big of a deal, right? So you don't have these bits sticking. Cool. So at this point, we need to make the hot side of the spacecraft, which is the satellite bus. So we're going to come down over here, and I'm going to start the satellite bus with another remote guidance unit. We're going to put that there, and then we're going to need a, box. So we're going to need a pretty decent-sized box, actually. We're going to need... Let's see. We could make it just circular for purposes of KSP. That might not be the worst idea. It's square on JWST because it doesn't need to be aerodynamic. But, well, that's not the only reason. But we could make this be circular. That's a lot easier in KSP, for sure. So we could just put in like a 2.5 meter service bay, like this. That's approximately the right size. And then out the back of the telescope is where the solar panel is. So the telescope, this is intended to be away from the sun at all times. This is towards the sun. And so the telescope has its solar panel, its singular solar panel, out right here. And I think that's at a slight angle. Let me double check that. Yes, it is. So it's at a slight angle, and it's basically a gigantor, is basically what it is. So they have that here going this direction. But when it extends not flat like this, but rather kind of like that. Although not quite at that sharp of an angle. I'm going to turn snapping off, and we'll bring that in to be kind of like that. Just so that that's always lower than this. Like this lowest level here. Oh, that's suddenly very sensitive. Okay. Sure, we'll come in from this angle. There. It's at a slight angle. Then they have radiators down here to help keep it cool. So the radiators come off of this, like, parallel to the instruments out over this way. So they have a couple of, like, small thermal control systems, or really just, like, radiator panels, but I'm going to use, like, extendable thermal control systems, and those come off... This is some really weird angling that it's wanting to put this on at. Okay. Well, for one thing, snapping should be on for this. Okay. So these come off, and actually, I'm going to rotate this. Like that. Because these guys come off over this way. And they're like straight out because it's a box. We're radially attaching them, so they're not going to be quite straight. But that's fine. So those radiators are not this large, for the record. But KSP, what are you going to do? Okay. We don't need 2 solar panels. It's only the 1. There we go. kind of like that. And then there are a smattering of other radiators and things like that, but I think I'm going to omit those for right now because these radiators are definitely overkill. So that's fine. We've got our solar panel, we've got our radiators. They have a single RCS thruster block on here. And actually, I believe that thruster block, looking at the reference image here, technically that thruster block only has 3 output. That's exciting. Okay, so we don't really have anything like that. We're just going to use a variable thruster block here, or whatever the largest is, because that thruster block is relative to this quite a bit bigger. It's about that size. Yeah, about this size here. So I'm going to put that right, it should go basically in the front, but it's a bit off center. I'm going to center it in the front just because that'll make things a little bit easier. And we don't have any monoprop for this right now, but it is also a little bit angled, and I'm going to go ahead and do that. So angling it kind of like this, and that's the only thruster that James Webb has that I can see. So that's exciting. Inside of the service bay, they have all sorts of, experiments and equipment and things like that. Looking at the diagram here, yeah, that's inside of here is where they have a lot of that sort of thing that doesn't end up living on the cold side. So that would all go here. For what we're going to do, I think we're going to put in a couple of rechargeable battery packs. I'm going to put in 4 of those. So 2 here and 2 here. Cool. I'm also going to store our RCS fuel here. So we will go ahead and put in an RCS fuel tank inside of here. And that can go right here. That's 20 monoprop. What is the monoprop usage of this per second? That's something I'm interested in finding out. Let's check here. Command and control. So this is the 105A RCS thruster block. 0.1 per second. So this would get us quite a ways, but I do want to have, I think, a little bit bigger of an RCS tank here. Not that big. Not that big either. About that size. That's 120 monoprop. That'll be a lot of monoprop. And inside of here would also be things like the... well, there's some science here, I think. Most of the science is actually located in here. Oh, this is... this got moved at some point. We'll have to fix that. How did that happen? But most of the science is inside of here, I believe. Most of the science experiments. I guess because this got moved? Or... oh, it's because we rerouted the part. Right. Let's reroute it again. Let's reroute it again. And it got flipped upside down at some point there. But there we go. So that's now rerouted again. And now we can properly move this part back. Cool. So this guy gets positioned without snap-on right about there-ish. And then it needs to be moved back, recessed ever so slightly. Cool. Like that. Okay, so we will retract these radiators and our solar panel for now. Cool. Inside of here, I'm just going to toss the normal Kerbal array of science experiments. We will toss in a 2-hot thermometer. We'll toss in an atmospheric spectrovariometer. We will toss in a seismic accelerometer, even though we're never going to be on a planet. And we'll grab... a KER, that'll be fine. That'll be our flight computer. We could also put in a press map barometer and just a few other science experiments. A mystery goo containment unit. We've got a lot of room in this service bay, right? So we can fit a lot of stuff in there, but that's fine for now. We'll call that good. And that is fundamentally our JWST. Now this does not compress down anywhere near as much as the actual one does, because this is all essentially fabric. It's not actually fabric. I think it's some kind of plastic polymer or something. I'm not sure exactly what the sun shield is made out of, but it's a little thinner than this. They're the sun shields there are in about the in the real one are in about the space that one of ours is here, so we've got a lot more space there, but we were able to compress that. Okay. So that's all well and good. That's fundamentally the JWST there. Fundamentally. Now we need to launch this thing in an Ariane 5. And of course, that looks like this. So here's the thing. I'm pretty sure that our fairing is going to have these bits sticking out of it. I'm reasonably certain that that's going to be the case. Let's go ahead and put in a TD25 decoupler right here. And then this is going to be the fairing. So we're going to get ourselves a 2.5 meter fairing. And that is going to be about like this. Now you'll note that there's definitely bits sticking through this, and it doesn't like that. It doesn't want us to make this fairing. Okay. I mean, we can do this, but it doesn't want us to have all of these bits sticking through it. Fair enough. That's not how it's supposed to work. I'm guessing these are not physics-less parts. We could go for an absolutely ridiculous fairing. This is perhaps the most ridiculous fairing I have ever made. Well, it works. It's a UFO, but it works. Oh boy. And then we want this immediately to go down to a 2.5 meter. So in that case, we would want, looking at the upper stage here, the upper stage of an Ariane 5 is pretty small, really. So that would be something along the lines of, we would have, I mean, we could go for like a Kerbidyne tank. I mean, not that Kerbidyne tank. We could go for a Kerbidyne tank, but I do think that I want to go for like a Rockamax size tank. So I would just do something kind of like this. Yes, that's a big jump there. And yes, this fairing is going to suck to try to lift. What is our mass of this thing as is? Probably huge. The 70 tons, that's actually not that bad. Okay, so we would have this be pushed probably by something along the lines of a poodle. And like that. So how much delta V is this actually? 882 in this upper stage here. Okay. So that's not a ton, but that fairing would be gotten rid of by the time that happens. That brings us up to 1209. That's much better. To be clear, this fairing is not realistic, and I don't recommend it. That's just because we can't collapse down our sun shield anywhere near as much as it can be collapsed down in reality. So we're going to put in a 2.5 meter fairing here. Or not a fairing, a 2.5 meter decoupler. And we're now going to start working on the actual, the lifter part of the Ariane 5. So we're going to lift this up and come on down here. I'm going to have this be, looking at this, it looks to me like there's a 16 tank, so a Rockamax 16, and this should be white, or like ESA. No, just white. The ESA is later on. So then we have a 32 tank, and that's where that ESA pattern starts, like that. And then we have a 64 tank, which is also set up as ESA. Then is the booster, which we're just going, or rather the engine. Then we're just going to use the mainsail there. So that will be this guy, like that. What is this thrust to weight? 1.01. Okay. Good to know. So we'll do something like this for now. This fairing is so ridiculous. I don't know how we may have to modify the Ariane 5 to lift this a little bit. We'll see. But at this point, we need to have some side decouplers, and we're going to use these radial decouplers. Where is the attach point on the Ariane 5? Looks like it's reasonably high up here. Yes. So the attach point is basically at the top of this tank here. And let's grab our, not our strut, our nose cone. For the Ariane 5, we need one of those wibbly wobbly bendy nose cones, like this guy. And that would go here-ish. It is beautiful, it's true. It's made of a material named Captain and coated with aluminum. There's also a coating of doped silicon for layer 1 and 2, according to NASA. Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. Functionally, it works as a fabric, not as this solid that we have here. Okay. So this might be too small of nose cones for what we're looking for. We probably want to go for like advanced nose cones type A. No, maybe not. Advanced nose cones type B. So what size of SRBs can this be? I'm concerned about how much delta V we have in this thing, but we just have to go to a fake Lagrange point. So that's maybe okay. I'm also concerned about how this is snapped on here. More like that. Okay. So this is going to be like long, narrow ones, isn't it? So that would be like the kickbacks. Even those are a little too big for these nose cones. Okay, I definitely want bigger. Yeah, this is looking at the reference image. It's more like Pollux's in terms of size. So I'm just going to attach the Pollux's here, and we'll find the correct nose cones. So we'll attach the Pollux's like that. No, I don't want another... No, get out of here. Get out of here. There we go. We'll bring this down. Pollux's are maybe a little bit tall for this, but then again, maybe not. I want them to be spaced out slightly more, like that. And what's our angling looking like? That looks good. Okay, so let's find a nose cone for it. We know we need the bendy nose cones. I would normally use like these, but ESA uses ones like these. Now, are there bigger nose cones like that that would fit the Pollux size in the stock game? I'm not sure that there are, but I definitely think we need the larger SRBs here. And we might extend this tank as well. We'll see. How are we looking for thrust to weight? 1.55? That's okay, but our overall delta V is not looking amazing. I'm thinking about extending this tank with a second 32. Or even a 16 if that's too long. Yeah, we'll extend it with a 16 and use that same pattern and do something kind of like that, I think. Not quite an Ariane 5, but we need to change things a bit anyway. That fairing is... the fairing is special. I'm not gonna lie. Every time I look at it, I'm just like, oh boy. Oh boy. How are we going to lift this thing? But I think overall the weight isn't that bad. So we can do something like this. It's not exactly an Ariane 5 down here. It's similar. They do have it strutted together down this way. And really, looking at the strutting here, we're going to want to have this strutted right about here. And that's probably about sufficient. But I'm also going to strut it up here just to be safe. That one didn't go. Okay, there we go. Fantastic. Something along the lines of that. So, thrust to weight. 1.49. Little bit slow off the pad. This fairing is way heavier than it should have to be. No doubt about it. I may want to extend this stage too. If we do that, we need more thrust to weight. I think overall, we're gonna hope that we're good. Let's see how terribly this thing flies. This is going to be exciting. I think we're going to be extraordinarily top-heavy. We're probably going to need fins on this, is my guess. Looking at aerodynamic versus center of mass. Center of mass is here, which isn't that bad. I mean, this is mostly empty. That's for sure. Well, we'll see how it flies. If it crashes, I'm going to blame it on the fairing. This is going to be very interesting. We can try to take this to the Lagrange point, which doesn't exist in KSP. But, yikes. This thing is awkward, for sure. Once we ditch the fairing, it should be okay. Once we get into space. Now, I'm expecting... Yeah, we've got some frame drops here. I'm expecting our sun shield is just wobbling all over the place. And that's exactly what's happening. I'm not necessarily loving what we've got going on there. We're definitely picking up a Kraken. Okay, we're going to revert that back, and we're going to do a little bit of strut work inside of there. The struts will be disconnected once we get into space. So, first things first. I am going to strut some of... Well, this isn't actually that big of a concern, I don't think. Let's go ahead and strut together. We don't want to strut together these, necessarily. What I want to do is I want to strut this to down here. Then, this to here, if we can. It doesn't want to go through there. It wants to strut that together. We definitely don't want that strutted. Okay. We may just have to accept the Kraken. Because of how wacky this is. I don't like the amount of wobbling it was doing. One thing we could potentially do is strut from here to there. Nope. That's blocked by the sun shield. Okay. Well, we can try lifting this with the Kraken going and see what happens. It's going to be exciting. There's no doubt about it. This is going to be very, very exciting. We'll try to get this thing lifted, and I'm not going to be held responsible for what happens here. Keep in mind that those parts are going to be fine, by and large. They're not going to blow each other up. They can clip through each other without problem. So we'll try to lift this. Frame rate is going to be interesting. We've got ourselves our rocket with a sombrero, I guess. And let's see how this goes. I'm expecting this to go poorly. Slow off the pad, but we knew that. We were 1.51 thrust to weight. And I'm also not entirely convinced that we have enough oomph to lift this thing. But once we get rid of this fairing, that's a huge amount of our weight that is going to be gone. I'm going to try to gravity turn here. Yikes. Yikes indeed. We're going to lock to prograde, and we're just going to try to go up as we can. As up as we can. This is going to continue. Yeah, this is about what I expected. We're going to tumble here. Okay, I'm going to revert that back, and we're going to try to just launch straight up and see what happens. Let's not try to turn at all. This is not a good ascent profile, but with the amount of Kraken we've got going on here, that might be the best bet. This fairing is ridiculous. Okay, so we'll throttle that up. We are going straight up. We will try to turn once we are out of the atmosphere. I hope. I'm still very concerned about Delta V in this Ariane 5, quote unquote. We may have to make this heavy lifter, but that's exclusively because of, like, Kerbal limitations, right? So, this thing immediately starts going all over. And we're gimbaling to try to compensate for this party that's going on up here, which is exciting. I guess we're going into a 225 degree inclination. I've not done any of this. This is just natural. This is the way this flies. I think we're going to need pins. I also think that we're going to need to change the route of our part. Yep. Okay, so we're going to revert this back. And we're going to have to make some alterations to get this thing lifted. That's for sure. And it's all because of this fairing. Hypothetically, what happens if we try to lift it without the fairing? How badly does this go? I'm curious. This is going to be a train wreck. I'm quite certain on that. But let's see what happens here. What do we got? Like, these are going to be crackening completely. Fully and completely. Come on, you can load. We are going to be a lot lighter, though. So there is that. So at this stage, it's not too bad, right? Once we lift off, this happens. And we just pretty much immediately lose control, and the Kraken picks up. So that's not super shocking, right? Let's go ahead and revert that back to vehicle assembly, and we're going to have to make some alterations here. That's very clear. Alteration number 1. We are going to reopen the JWST with this ridiculous fairing. Then, I'm going to actually rebuild this fairing. I want to edit the fairing. I want to bring this back, and I want to check here exactly how wide does this have to be. Like that. That's still a very ridiculous fairing. I want to edit that a little bit. I didn't nail the end there. Okay. So I'll bring that up about like so, and close the fairing like that. Now, I'm going to modify this upper stage to be larger. We're going to give this the Carbidine tanks here, and that will be the... Where are we at? Here we go. We're going to give it that tank. I'm going to get rid of this in its entirety. And we're going to bring this down. Is there a vacuum-optimized Carbidine size engine? Like the Corgi. Even the Corgi is too small. But the Corgi will do for now. And then we will put in a... I believe this needs to be a 5-meter stack separator. Yeah. So you can definitely see the Corgi is too small there. I would like to find a 5-meter vacuum-optimized engine. Is there such a thing? I feel like you're not supposed to have a craft this tall, or rather this wide, that high. But sure. For now, we're going to call this good. I'm not hugely enthused about it, but it's fine. And we're going to get a main booster here with a pair of 512 tanks. Moving this up a bit. But I'm going to, here, put in a remote guidance unit. A large one. Like the largest one we have. Like that. This stage will have to be reinforced a bit, and we will do so. We're going to put in a second Carbidine tank here, and now I'm going to put in an engine plate. We're going off the rails with this lifter at this point. So engine plate will be an EP50, and I want at least quad. Okay. So we're going to lift this with quad mainsails. Like so. And what's that thrust to weight? 0.7. Okay, let's go ahead and reinforce this area here. We're going to use quad symmetry, and we're going to connect that with that. That only worked for a couple of them. Okay. We'll try it again. Okay. We'll do it from the decoupler then. Cool. So we'll get that reinforced a bit. And now we will put our decouplers on. I'm definitely going to use the larger standoffs. And we're probably going to have to at least quad this. I'll put that up there for now, and we're going to use Clydesdales. The single largest SRBs we've got. Actually, no, we're not. We are going to liquid launch, or liquid lift this. So we're going to bring a pair of Rockamaxes in each of these stacks, along with another mainsail. So that's going to be 8 mainsails lifting this. And what's that thrust to weight looking like? 1.01. So, even that's too little. I mean, these S4512s are huge. We could maybe ditch one of those tanks and do something more like this. That might be a little bit safer, or smarter even. Bring this down, and then we would need to have aerodynamic nose cones on here. That would be these guys. And then we would definitely want to run a fuel line in like so. And then we'd strut that as well. A strut here, and a strut here. There we go. What's that thrust to weight? 1.36. Even that's pretty low. Okay. So we could take this up to 8 couple. That might be overkill. Let's see. This is absurd. And looking at that, 1.48. That's still pretty slow off the pad. Still pretty slow. Now, this fairing's a large amount of our weight. What is our overall mass, though? Yeah, it's very high. Very, very high indeed. Instead of running mainsails in the center core, or even in the booster cores, we could theoretically run vectors. Let's take a look at the sea level thrust here. 936, and mainsails are higher at sea level. Okay, just wanted to double check that. Okay. So that's 1.48 thrust to weight, and then once we get up here, it's 1.1. So we're going to be slightly slow off the pad, but it's not the slowest thing I've ever seen. This is, of course, a giant mess, and I wouldn't mind getting some strutting in here. I think this connection here is probably what's causing some of the crackening. So I wouldn't mind going into... Apparently we can't do mirror symmetry. But I wouldn't mind doing something kind of like this and strutting that. And then doing the same thing up here. That's probably some of what that crackening was. Okay, that's a little awkward. I wanted it to be more like that, but it doesn't want to go that way. I guess this is fine. As long as they're connected, which apparently they are. So that's good. So we do something kind of like that to tamp down on the crackening a little bit. And then as far as lifting this thing goes, it's going to be interesting. That's a lot of delta V once we get to stage 2 here. So that should be okay. This is obviously not an Ariane 5. But our fairing had to be ridiculous to fit this thing, and that also means that our rocket needs to be ridiculous. So that's fine. We tried the Ariane 5. It did not work. So we'll see if this is going to be a little bit better. Now, I do want to, once we load this in, I don't want to control from the location on the James Webb Space Telescope right now. I want to control from the location here. So we'll control from there to negate any crackening that is happening up here. And there likely will be additional crackening. We'll see how that goes. This frame rate is exciting, but let's go. Quite slow off the pad. We expected this. This is actually far slower off the pad than I thought it would be. Our thrust to weight is showing us 1.57. I don't know. Maybe the frame rate is causing some of that. Let's try turning this thing. Okay. It's somewhat turnable. Controlling from here helps a lot. That makes us a lot more stable. Oh, I think we might be entering a tumble here. Let's just try to go to prograde at this point. And let's just try to go up as we can. We've got about 1 minute to burn here. This is going to keep happening. Hopefully we can get that under control. Hopefully we can also get our angling under control. We might have to go put aerodynamic controls on this. Okay. This is a very spicy launch. There's no doubt about that. You can see this really starting to wiggle back and forth. Oh, that's very crackeny. So, did those parts break off? I believe they may have. Yeah. So, we're going to have to do something about that. One thing I would like to double check. I'm just thinking here. If we strutted these together, then we can't extend them the way we want to, but that would solve a lot of that problem. We probably do want to turn unbreakable joints on, and I also want to bring this up to 8, because I was seeing some bend happening here even with 4 struts. So I'm going to do that, and I'm also going to bring in struts from here to here. And then we're going to take some tail fins as well, and we are going to put those in. Let's see here. Tail fins. Easier to search. Tail fin. So we're just going to bring those in and have those be out here. Okay. Now, I would like to clamp down on what's going on inside the JWST. I don't think we can release struts without an engineer there, ex post facto, but we can double check that. I don't think that would work. But what we've got right now is a pretty major issue. One thing I am going to do for the moment is I'm going to open up the cheat menu here as soon as it loads in. And for purposes of dealing with the Kraken, that is basically inevitable at this point, I'm going to see what happens if we turn off the... What is it called? We want to turn on unbreakable joints. And probably, no crash damage isn't super relevant, but let's turn that unbreakable joints on, and let's see how this goes. We're very slow off the pad. I'm thinking about upgrading our mainsails here to maybe like multiple vectors over the 4 mainsails. But we are slow off the pad. Now we can see bits moving around in there. That's not super shocking. We're going to head on over and start getting our turn here. Another thing I might end up doing is just delivering this thing into orbit, letting the Kraken do what it's going to do, and then say we got it into orbit, cheat a uncrakened version of it into orbit. That might be a decent option too, because, I mean, these bits are just going all over. So there is that. And it's pulling our rocket all over, too. So there's some awkwardness going on in that fairing. No doubt about that one. But we're just going to continue to push up through the thickest portion of the atmosphere here. We're just moving very slowly, and I think a lot of it is due to drag from this. So one thing I think I'm going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to put a mass simulator in that fairing. And then we're going to put the actual JWST up with the after we get the mass simulator into orbit. So what is the actual mass of the JWST? The mass here is 33 tons. Okay, so we're going to put this back on, and we're going to save this. Then we're going to get rid of, not that necessarily. We want to have, let's reroute this, and we'll make that be our root part. Cool. Then we're going to come up here, get rid of the JWST for purposes of this simulation. I want to make sure that we have this saved, though. So we save that. There we go. We'll get rid of that for the moment. And we need a mass simulator up here that is 33 tons. So like a fuel tank or something like that. Let's see. The mass of this tank is 20 tons. This one is 40. This one's 36. So we could put like this tank here as our mass simulator. Drop that tonnage ever so slightly. Let's see here. We need to drop this like 3 tons. Like that. So that is the same mass as our JWST. And this is going to be much less likely to crack it. And then we can put a duplicate of the JWST in like the exact same orbit and then get rid of this. So I think that's the way we're going to beat the Kraken here. Let's launch this and get this into orbit. And then we'll put the JWST into the same orbit with the same-ish amount of fuel. We can't get the exact same amount, but it'll be similar. But that Kraken is just too much. So let's get this going, and we'll see how much that, if any, that was actually causing us in drag. I don't know. We'll see. Any moment now. Okay. And off we go. This already feels so much faster. I think it was just causing huge amounts of drag even in the fairing. Which is not how fairings are supposed to work, for the record. KSP was clearly very confused. This is going so much better with a mass simulator. Okay. Looks good. We're just going to continue heading on over here. And for the time being, I'm going to chill over here at 45 degrees. Actually, we'll just lock to prograde for the time being. I think this is going maybe a little too aggressively to the horizon, but we're not moving super quickly here. Let's hold here and just continue to push upwards and horizontally at the same rate. Okay. So we're going to burn out our side tanks here soon. With us being not exactly on prograde, that's going to be a little bit concerning for our separation. That's for sure. We're going to want to head over to prograde here pretty soon, I think. Okay, let's head to prograde. There we go. And we're going to need to separate, and hopefully we don't have any of these blow into us, but with us at prograde, we should be okay, in theory. Yes. Beautiful. And not exactly a Korolev cross there, but that was basically the same concept. That was a really pretty separation. I like that. So we're continuing to push up here. You can see our time to apoapsis is currently dropping a little bit. So with that being the case, I'm going to hold here rather than staying at prograde. And now that has slowed down, and it will start going up shortly. There we go. Cool. So we're going to let that stay put for the moment and work our way a bit higher. We've still got almost 90 seconds of burn here, so that's pretty good. Okay. Only 45k on the apoapsis height, so we've got a lot of horizontal speed, not a ton of vertical. I'm just holding here for the moment rather than going to prograde because I want to push up that apoapsis height a little bit higher. And I also want to ditch this fairing fairly soon, because that's a huge amount of our mass. Well, not a huge amount, but a huge amount of our payload mass, which is the more important number there. So let's hop on over to prograde at this point. We can see that we are going up into space here. And in fact, we can hold at the horizon now. Cool. That is so much easier without all of that drag. So yeah, the mass simulator was certainly the way to go. I'm going to ditch this fairing, and we're going to kill our engines here. We'll just drift up a little bit towards 100 kilometers, and we'll look at getting into a 100-kilometer orbit. About like that. Only 200 meters per second there. Looks good. Okay, so we know exactly what state we're going to be in when we bring up the actual version, right? This was only done because of the Kraken. This tank here, and we didn't use that fuel. That fuel was removed from there. That's just a mass simulator there. So that's the same amount of mass as our JWST. We just had so much Krakening going on. Okay, we are now officially in space, and we will warp on over. There we go. And we'll get aligned for that burn. We'll warp to the burn. And we'll get ourselves into orbit. Not a huge burn here, only 236.9 meters per second. So we know that we're going to have some fuel left in this tank. And that'll be great. About a minute on this burn. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Oh, we're communication locked. Yeah, that's because we don't actually have the JWST here. I'm going to clear that. We would have the JWST. These are not burning. Can you burn, please? We would have comms if we had the JWST on here. So, that's a thing. Why isn't this burning? This should be burning. I'm going to reload it. Hop back to the Space Center, reload this. We should have even been able to burn it without clearing the input lock there. With no probe control. Oh, the problem was we ran out of power, didn't we? I bet you that's the problem. Again, that wouldn't have been an issue if we had the actual JWST on there, because we have batteries on the JWST. So I don't think the problem was comms. I think the problem was power, and that's because of the mass simulator. So if that's the case, then we'll just turn on infinite electricity, and that should be fine. Because we would have had the power to do that. This is on suborbital trajectory. Let's load this back in. I'm quite certain that the issue here is power. So any moment now we'll load. Again, if we had not had the mass simulator and had the real one, it would have had 400 extra electric charge. So that should have been more than enough. But yeah, we would have very little electric charge on this as is. Yeah. So that's the problem, and we'll just rectify it like so. Apparently our SAS isn't popping up, so I'll just have to manually steer it. But sure. Okay, so that puts us into orbit there, and what is that orbit? This orbit is fine. It's not perfect, but it's fine. How much fuel do we have left in here? 2353. Sounds good. So we are at this point going to head back to the Space Center, and we're going to put up the quote-unquote real JWST. Now that we don't have to lift it through the atmosphere. We know that we have like 2,400-ish. I'm going to go a little lower than that in this tank. So we're going to have to reduce that down. We're going to have to stage out our side stages. And that's fine. We'll just leave those at home. We're transitioning from the mass simulator to the JWST is what's happening here. So we'll load this in. It's starting to get a little bit laggy because of all of the loading that we've been doing. It could use a KSP restart, but that's fine. Any moment now, KSP. You can respond. You can do it. I'm sure you can do it. There we go. Okay, so we'll go ahead and open up our saved JWST. Wait, did I accidentally save it? Did I delete? Oh my god. I deliberately thought I didn't save it. We saved the JWST. I must have just by default hit it there and overwrote it. I'm so mad right now. Oh man. I knew that the autosave would save it, but I deliberately saved it as the JWST. I must have accidentally hit the save button. I do that just habitually. I'm so mad right now. That whole thing is lost. Oh boy. Well, at least we have the process of building it. And we know we could get it into orbit. Once we got it there, the hard part would be over. I'm very angry with myself right now. We got it into orbit mass-wise. So what I would have done in this situation, if I hadn't have been really, really dumb, I should have just renamed this as like the JWST, for one thing, not JSWT. But I should have renamed this as the mass simulator and then saved that. That's what I should have done. Oh, man. That's definitely what I should have done. But here's what would have happened at this point. So I'll just show you what would have happened at this point, and then we'll call it good for there, I guess. But yeah, I'm very upset about that. So we're going to drop this down to here. This is approximately the amount of fuel we had left, and then we would delete this fairing, and the actual JWST would be here, right? Your keyboard is also dying right now? Yeah, well, it's not the only one. I am currently dying. So we would have it be like this, and then this would get launched with the actual JWST on it, which apparently no longer exists because I am the stupidest person on the planet. And at that point, then we would come in here. We have all of the correct amount of fuel. So we would put this into the same orbit with the cheat menu and not have the Kraken. So this would load in. I'm very upset about that, but at least we have the record of what it looked like. That's nice, but I'm very angry at myself right now. But then we would put this into orbit matching the JWST mass simulator, or I guess this one. And we do this. So that would put us here in the same approximate orbit. There it is, right there, with the same approximate amount of fuel. So if we look here, we can see that has 306 meters per second, or 312 meters per second. This has 306. So then we would do that, and then I'll go ahead and put this into the Lagrange point orbit, or, I mean, it doesn't exactly exist, but I'll go ahead and do that here. Well, we're going to need the infinite electricity because we don't have the solar panel in the mass simulator, but that's fine. We'll do infinite electricity, and this would get flipped over. We would have a lot more reaction wheels in the actual one. Oh, I'm very frustrated with myself. It's not KSP's fault. It's entirely my own. I shouldn't have tried to have it be the same ship. I should have named it a different thing. That's entirely my own fault. But from here, we would not do a gravity assist the way I normally would. We would simply burn prograde. Oh, we need to actually stage this. We would simply burn prograde. And this would all be fine to combine together. We've got a little bit of a wobble here, but that's fine. And off we would go. Keep in mind this is the same weight, so all of these are or very close to the same weight. So all of these would be the same if I was not the largest idiot on the planet. And we are just going to push this all out. Have I got any cool ideas for when KSP 2 drops? Honestly, I'll have to see what is all involved in KSP 2. I'm not super up to date on the changes that are being made for that, but that's certainly something that we can think about once that is a little bit more in people's hands. So we push our apoapsis out here. And I mean, I'd probably choose the timing a little bit more carefully than this. How long did it take to make? That was about 2 hours to make, probably. 2.5, something like that. I'm very frustrated. But we'll just push this on out, and we would make escape velocity here. The mass simulator is fine for this. I won't have the satisfaction of being able to deploy it. And that makes me sad. So the Lagrange point would end up being about 1,000,000 miles away from Earth, right? So it would be, if we were to push out our apoapsis here, the Lagrange points don't exist in KSP, but we could push it out to be somewhere around here-ish, which is approximately where I would expect that to be. So then we would come out over here, we would warp up to there. Rip indeed. I don't even know what to say about that. It's entirely my own fault, but at least we can do this and it'll be fine. Okay. So 30 days, and then we would push this back out, and it's not actually at the Lagrange point, the James Webb Space Telescope. It's actually, we're not actually pointing the correct direction. It's not actually at the Lagrange point. It is instead orbiting the Lagrange point, kind of, in a weird sort of way. But KSP doesn't support that. Maybe KSP 2 would. But we'll push this on out and circularize this, and we'll just be at approximately the correct distance. And then once we get that circularized, then we'll just talk through what the deployment process would have been. But man, I'm not upset with KSP. I'm upset with myself right now. So we'll push this out and get this approximately where that should be, ish. We definitely would have had more than enough delta V to do this. That's for sure. So we'd do something kind of like this. Then we'd come in here. We'd still have plenty of fuel here, but I would still probably end up decoupling this. If we do that, this is going to just go away and we don't have any way to track that, but I would probably end up decoupling this at this point. Then we would work on tensioning the sun shield, which would mean we would extend the various arms for all of the bits there. And fingers crossed we wouldn't have a Kraken at this point. We might have a Kraken at this point. But we'd extend that out to get the sun shield tensioned and get that set up the way it was in the vehicle creation. And then we would fold up the secondary mirror, bringing that to like 17, 18 degrees like we designed it to be at. Then we would fold in the two side mirrors and make sure to point it away from the sun. And that would be what we would do there. Of course, that would take probably 20, 30 minutes to get all of that done, probably. It's quite a lot. And we'd make little tweaks here and there to how our mirrors were set up and things like that. And that was the plan for the rest of the stream anyway. As it is, I think I might just end the stream early here. We would end up pointing the JWST radial out like this. The sun shield would be blocking that. We'd have our we'd have our extension for the solar panel. It'd all be completely fine. And that would all be put together, and we'd have ourselves a quote-unquote functional JWST. As it is, I think I'm going to have to end it here. I'm very annoyed with myself for that one. But at least we'll always have the VOD of what the thing looked like. I'm reasonably proud of that build, but I'm very angry with myself for overwriting it with a mass simulator. That makes me very sad. At any rate, thank you very much for watching, and hopefully next time I will be less incompetent. Lesson learned, if you're gonna do something like that, always save it as a different file. Always. That's the takeaway here. Thank you very much for watching the stream, and I will, I guess, see you all next time. A very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this stream possible, including Casserole, Sigma162, JJ Gamer, Spartan News, Nick Smarty, Video Games Are Not Real, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.